Hello and welcome to this week's 10-minute reset episode. Self-care feels nice, but self-regulation keeps you alive. So here is a question straight out of the Facebook group. I loved it. If you'd like to join the Facebook group, please go to the show notes and click on join the Facebook group. I'm in there. It is such a great group of women. So the question was, if self-care actually worked, why are so many of us losing it after the walk, the massage, the yoga, reading the book? Why can I go from calm in the car after having a coffee with a friend to everyone shut up in 6.4 seconds after I've just done all of the right things doing self-care? And why does my partner, after he's given me the morning off, then expect me to be Mother Nature right after? Oh my God, that post was the best. So let's talk about self-regulation and self-care. Because if you've ever walked back in after a little bit of time off and just hit pure rage real quick, this is a great episode for you. A lot of people talk about self-regulation or co-regulation, but a lot of people don't understand how it's different from self-care and when we do each and why they're important. Self-regulation is your nervous system's ability to say to itself, things are escalating, I'm starting to get frustrated. You might start that emotional climb. You might start getting a bit of the shakes, you might start huffing, you might start repeating yourself, raising your voice, and you start to go on that emotional climb before you snap. This is about catching the emotional climb that you go on before you yell or you scream or you have to walk away and deep breathe, or you cry, whatever it is that you do when you start to go on that emotional climb. Often we can see our children's emotional climb, but we don't know how to recognize our own. Self-regulation is internal. It's how you ride that emotional roller coaster without kind of vomiting your emotions all over everyone else. Now, if you have children that struggle with emotional regulation, that's probably all of us. When they get dysregulated, they start disrupting and like it gets contagious. Everyone then starts to dysregulate around us. Yes, we as mothers do that too. For example, if you are neurodivergent, you probably are. If you haven't slept well, you probably haven't. You've probably been woken up many times. If you're overstimulated, you probably are. Or maybe you've got PMS. Your self-regulation may be less. Now, that doesn't make you broken. That doesn't make you a bad mum, but it can mean that you start to get dysregulated in your emotions quicker than other people. If you've watched this happen with your children, it's probably you too. So self-regulation is really internal. What triggers you off, what you do when you get emotionally dysregulated is all internal. Self-care, on the other side, is the opposite. It's external. It's the stuff that we try and do to support our self-regulation. So, for example, walks, the face mask, having a bath, yoga, all of the cliche ones that we hear about. But it could also be like watching trashy TV whilst hiding from our families. That could be self-care. Talking to a friend might be self-care. Me, I'm hyperactive. I'm a mover. My self-care is like walking the dog. I enjoy moving self-care kind of activities. Let's just say, for example, you are at a 9 out of 10. You've picked up the kids. Everyone's crying. They're all arguing. You've got an extracurricular activity to go to. Maybe you have a partner and they say, what's for dinner? Maybe you don't have a partner and you realized you've got to make dinner. What is going to help you in that moment? There is no bath that's going to help you at that moment because you can't have a bath in that moment. Obviously, that's not the time for self-care. You need to self-regulate first in this situation. Self-care can come in after you've climbed back down from the emotional ledge. Otherwise, it just feels like another thing to do. So it's like, oh, on top of all of this overwhelm and stress I've got, I've really got to go to yoga because why am I dysregulated? No, that's actually yoga's got nothing to do with it at this point. For me, sometimes self-care just feels like something I fail at. And when I'm feeling just emotionally dysregulated, I think this is because I haven't done any self-care, and then I layer on more guilt and shame. So how do they work together? Self-regulation is like a fire extinguisher. It's what you reach for in the moment to put out the emotional blaze. Just imagine you've got a fire, it's simmering. You can see it's starting to really catch fire. It's starting to heat up. That's the emotional climb. And you'll have your own things that you do in that moment that will tell you that you're on the climb. Self-regulation at this point is the fire extinguisher on the emotional blaze. That is what is going to bring you back from a full-on house fire. But self-care is more preventative. It is like the fireproofing. It helps reduce the amount of emotional fires that you're going to have to put out later. Fireproofing doesn't work when you've got a house fire, does it? But it does work preventing the house catching fire. They work together and they work in an order. If you are emotionally dysregulated and then you try and self-care your way out of it, it's not going to work. You'll scroll for 20 minutes, get annoyed that you wasted your time, and then yell again. So for example, in the moment, if you are on a 9 out of 10 and you try to meditate, you might struggle. You might then get angry at yourself for failing at meditating and that you wasted your time and then come back and yell again because you're still frustrated. So what works better? Noticing early signs of overwhelm. For example, for me, a clenched jaw, a snappy tone, and I won't say it's snappy, I won't realize it, but I know it's snappy. If you video yourself on your phone, when you think you might be getting a little bit dysregulated, it can be a little bit shaming. Don't feel like you need to show anyone, but you'll actually see what you're like. I know I don't necessarily show my rage, but I walk around stomping in a really grumpy way. My internal thoughts are like, I hate this. I don't like this. This always happens. He this, she that. And it's like blame, self-blame, inner critic going around. So what can we do before we go full dragon? Self-regulation strategies are going to be different for everyone. You might step outside for 30 seconds. A lot of us have got explosive kids. We don't have 15 minutes to go and do breathing. I get that. Step outside for 30 seconds is one. Name your level out loud. I do this. I go to the bathroom, I do a wee, and I say I'm getting close to the edge. I'm about a 90%. Sit down, literally. If you can't fix the mood, sit down for a moment and put your head between your knees as if you've just run some kind of marathon. You might take a deep breath. I know someone who actually skips with the skipping rope. She likes to move. You might open a Kit Kat. You might text a friend, I'm effing done. You might lie on the floor. Strip back what actually works for you in the moments, not what you think should work. Pre-plan this. Think back to when you've been on the edge and you've come back from it and you've recovered. What did you do in those moments? Then come back and enter back into the situation after you've self-regulated. Can you see here that self-care doesn't actually have anything to do with regulating in the moment? Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, when do I do self-care? That doesn't sound like it's going to help me in the moment. So key message here, you don't have to earn self-care. It should be part of our lives. However, many of us, myself included, struggle with time, with people to help with the kids, with being able to do it. So I'm not going to just say to everybody, oh, you've got to do self-care, and then people feel guilty or shameful that they're not doing it. I would love to tally up the amount of self-care I've had over the last 10 years. I don't even think I'd be in 20 hours if I'm honest. The last thing I want you to think is that I do self-care all the time and you should be, and that's something to feel shame or guilty about. There's so many reasons why we don't do self-care. I could do a whole episode on it. For me, it's one, logistical. I just don't have enough help and support with the kids. And two, there's a lot of guilt and shame around me taking that time out and how does that look in my life? If you are doing self-care regularly, I just want to tell you, you are killing it. I don't say that stuff because I want you to think that being a mum means not doing self-care. The goal is self-care. If you are doing self-care, just gold star yourself. If I could change one thing about myself, it would be that I would prioritize and do self-care more often. We are supposed to do self-care before we think we've earned it, before we have some kind of breakdown, before we have burnout. So self-care isn't about having a bubble bath after you've been screaming at someone. It's about interrupting the dysregulation spiral. When done proactively and preventatively, the right kind of self-care, and we're talking about nervous system regulation, whatever works for you, not following some influencer and what works for them, self-care really increases your tolerance window. It really protects your executive dysfunction And it reduces some of that emotional overwhelm, some of that mum rage that might fester. It's a preventative fireproofing that we spoke about, where you are less likely to catch fire with that fireproofing sitting there as a constant source. Going on a yoga retreat for one day once a year is not fireproofing. I would love to change the way that self-care is viewed. It is not about having a cup of tea at a wellness retreat for the day once every 6 months. It is supposed to be built in small moments regularly. Building self-care regularly into your life is going to build in more self-regulation into the actual days. And it will make you less reactive. And the science back this. When we regularly signal safety to a nervous system, we reduce the cortisol spikes and we increase access to the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which helps you parent the way you actually want to parent. So the short answer is do self-care before you deserve it. And it's not a reward. It's the foundation of motherhood. And really manage other people's expectations, including your own, that you are not going to come back Mother Nature from having 20 minutes off. It is a preventative, proactive, consistent approach that we need to have into motherhood. However, again, I acknowledge this is so much harder to do in society now than what we see online. There are so many women whose self-care is going to work. And if that's you, I encourage you to find the 2 minutes, the 3 minutes, even on two sides of the day, in the morning, 2 minutes, evening, just build in the smallest moments possible rather than just going to fold more washing. But the last thing I want to do is make you feel like there's another thing that you need to do. As a conclusion, you can't rest until you actually feel safe. But you can't feel safe if you're actually climbing your own emotional climb and your nervous system is hanging from a cliff. You don't need hundreds of dollars for a spa day. You just need moments where you notice the fire and throw water on it before it becomes a full bonfire. Because after the bonfire, there's always the guilt and shame that follows. You're not weak for needing both self-regulation and self-care. It's because your self-care and your self-regulation routines either aren't in place or they're not working or you're not doing it, or you're literally skipping all of the steps and prioritizing your children's self-care, your children's self-regulation, and you're not catching your own climb before it peaks. So today, maybe don't aim for calm. Just aim for catching yourself before you combust and just make a small improvement because that's enough. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Until next week.